from the Library of Congress and the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture.
And I'm Emily Crosby of the Southern Oral History Program at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and I'm conducting this oral history today as part of the Civil Rights History Project, which is an undertaking of the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of African American History and Culture and the American Folklife Center of the Library of Congress. Today is June 28th, 2013, and we are here with students from Adkin High School. And from left to right, Mr. Charles Jarmon, Mrs. Eleanor Stewart, Mr. John Dudley, Mrs. Frances Suggs, Mr. Harold Suggs, and Mr. Samuel Dove. Mr. Dove was class of 1960, and everyone else was class of 1952?
No.
51? No, several different ones?
Several different ones.
So what I'd like to do is ask everyone to introduce yourselves. If we could go around and you could say your name and what year you graduated, and then I'll come back with another question.
Okay.
Thank you.
My name is Charles Jarmon, and I graduated from Adkin High School, class of 1957.
My name is Eleanor Stewart, and I graduated from Adkin High School in 1955.
My name is John Dudley, and I graduated from Adkin High School in 1952.
My name is Frances Suggs, and I graduated from Adkin High School in 1953.
My name is Harold Suggs, and I graduated from Adkin High School in 1953.
My name is Samuel Dove. I graduated from Adkin High School in 1960.
Okay. Thank you very much. I was wondering if we could start by going around the room again, and if I could ask each of you to talk a little bit about your family background and sort of growing up in Kinston, North Carolina. I guess maybe if you could each speak for a couple of minutes, and then we can do some follow-up questions on your background, and then we'll talk about the protest. Mr. Jarmon?
My name is Charles Jarmon. I grew up in Kinston, North Carolina, in an extended family background. My mother and my father did not live together. And I grew up with my mother and my aunt, and she passed when I was 10 years old. My father passed when I was 12 years old, so I grew up with my grandmother and my aunt and uncle. And we stayed in the same place in Lincoln City in Kinston, North Carolina. And in the 11th grade, we moved on, I guess you would call it the cow pasture, on another part of town. And there I stayed until I left to go to the military in 1957.
What kind of work did your parents do and your grandparents?
My father was a mortician, and my mother was a tobacco factory worker. She worked and I think most people in that neighborhood worked either in the shirt factory or tobacco factory. And when the season was out, they worked as domestics.
Ms. Stewart?
I grew up in Kinston, North Carolina, on North Street, and my parents my father was Isaac Darden, and he was a businessman, and my mother was a musician. She played for First Baptist Church as minister of music, and she stayed at home. She was a housewife. She took care of the children. I am the oldest, and I had four brothers. One is deceased, and we had a very good life. My father was a very good caretaker of all of us, so we didn't want for much of anything. He provided everything for us. So, I walked to school every day like all of the kids in the area, and enjoyed my schooling. As a youngster, I really did not go to the public schools in Kinston. I went to, I can't even think of the name of the school, but it was outside of Kinston. there was a couple, Reverend and Mrs. Moses, they came by my house every morning and picked me up as a youngster and took me to school and until I was in the 4th grade. Then I became a student in the public schools in Kinston, North Carolina.
Was that a private school or a school in another community?
It was not a private school. It was a school in another community, and I guess you call it a school, as we used to say, out in the country. If you know it, because I felt like in Kinston we were in the city. But they, they were very gracious in doing that. So I came to the public schools in Kinston as a 4th grader, and then when Sampson Elementary School was built, my class was the first school to enter into that school as 6th graders. And then from there I went on to Adkin High School and finished there.
Do you know why your family sent you to a school out in the country?
Well, I think that the people, he was a minister, Reverend and Ms. Moses, we were just wonderful family friends, very close. And he was the principal of that little school. And in the school, I remember it was a potbelly stove, and there were 2 or 3 classes in the same classroom, and he was the principal. And I think it went through high school, as I remember, but I never got that far. But they were just good family friends and was gracious enough to take me along.
And your parents thought you would be well looked after, I
They
guess.
did, and I was.
What kind of work you said your father was a businessman?
Yes, he ran a pool room, and he ran a club called the Tuxedo Club. It was a private club, and also there was a soda shop that he also ran downstairs. And he built a commercial building in Kinston at the corner of Adkin and Tower Hill Road, which he rented out to a family that was well known in Kinston called the Beaches. And of course the property that he ran belonged to the Beaches, and they were good friends, so they just rented from each other. Very interesting family affair. So that's how that worked.
Mr. Dudley?
My name is John Dudley, and I grew up in Kinston, North Carolina, till 18 years old. My mother and father are deceased, but I did have the pleasure of having them for all of my 18 years. My mother died in 2010. My father died in 74, and they had 11 kids. We moved into Mitchell Wooden Court. My grandmother also lived in Mitchell Wooden Court, but she didn't have anybody at her house. I also had an aunt there, so that kind of made plenty of room for everybody. Now, I lived with my aunt 3 years, mainly of my high school years. I didn't know I was poor, because such as it was, my father provided 3 meals a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, which I'm not used to now, but we had that breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Now, at 18 years old, my senior year in high school, I would travel to Atlantic City to work. And that would take me through college. I worked every summer. And 1 or 2 summers, the elder was there. Also, I worked as a kid at a grocery store, and I delivered groceries to Elder's house every Saturday, and some other homes. And I had a good life. And college, I was able to maintain because I worked through college. And
What kind of work did your parents do?
now, my father was the, I guess you call it a mechanic today, but he was the handyman at the Wooden Court. My mother worked seasonal work in the tobacco factory. And I do remember after World War II, that she worked alongside many, many German prisoners who worked at the factory. That was very interesting. I guess about 40, 50. That was when they brought them to the city. Quite a few of them ended up in Kinston. And she worked right alongside those, and there was never a problem. They were guarded by security. And I guess that's basically it until we get
to
go for
till
it.
we move the story on.
Yes.
Mrs. Suggs?
Okay, I grew up in a family of about 5 or 6. I had a sister and a brother. My brother is older. They are both still living. And a mother and father who were in the family, and a grandmother and her husband. So we had a pretty interesting family setup. We went to, we went to school first in Lincoln City Elementary School. And that was a small school, maybe about 6 or 8 teachers. And then we went to Tower Hill Road. And we mainly went to that school because the principal was my mother's nephew, and she said she wanted us to go to a better school. She thought it was better. And anyway, we went to Tower Hill Road and then to Adkin. And life was pretty good for us. My father worked at a shirt factory. I really don't know what he did. I just know that he was able to come home for lunch and watch his stories every day.
Oh, really?
He rode a bicycle. And of course, he didn't know at that time that was very good for him. And he would come home for lunch every day. And my mother worked several different types of jobs. She worked in the tobacco factory, and she also did domestic work. And then eventually she worked in a Piney chemical company. She passed in the year that I graduated, 1953, year I graduated from high school. Let's see. I'm trying to remember the kind of life that we had. We had a very, very good life. We interacted with the neighbors, and we were in and out of the houses, and we had a lot of fun. I was musical, and my sister was musical. At least she wouldn't say that, but she was musical, and my brother was musical and still sings today at the age of 82. Yeah. So,
tell me a little bit about the dynamics of your family growing up.
That's pretty much my life in Kinston on Shine Street.
Shine Street?
Shine Street, yes.
Mr. Suggs?
I hope you have some time.
I'm ready to hear.
It's interesting. The experiences are very similar because we're coming from the same. I was an adopted child. I had a brother, but the parents, the people that raised me, were very loving. But the situations behind the separation of my brother and myself, were I guess were told to me. So the validity of them, I have to accept them as they were told to me. I was born in a Greene County, which is the adjoining county to Lenoir County, which is Greene County was in a place called Snow Hill, North Carolina. Hookerton, Greene County is usually adjacent to Lenoir County, which is Kinston. I went to school. All my schooling was done in Lenoir County from the first grade right on up through graduation. I had a very interesting, I guess you could say, childhood. I was an only child of an adopted family. They cared very much for me, and I realized that as the years went on. I met my father for the first time when I was in the 5th grade. My biological father. That's also the time I met my wife, who's sitting right beside me in the 5th grade. And my father bought me a bicycle. If some of you can remember this, a Schwinn bike. It has a spring in the back. And from that day forward, I became an entrepreneur, so to speak. Seriously, he bought me a bike, and with that bicycle, I got me a paper route. I used to deliver papers. I had 120 customers, and with those customers, it paid me $7.20 a week. Those customers, I got each one of those customers to subscribe to the Afro-American, and each paper that I sold, I got 3 cents for a paper. And we're talking about 1945. So in 1945, I had an income from the papers, the daily paper, and the papers that I sold was $10.80. With that bicycle on Saturday mornings, I went to the A&P with a wooden crate, with the lettuce crate at that time, and to my customers, I delivered their groceries to their homes. Because at that time, people didn't have cars. And I had a goal set for $15. I wasn't quitting until I made $15. And so I did that. And then on Sunday mornings, I went to Sunday school in the afternoon. But on Sunday mornings, I went through the neighborhood and collected their shoes to shine them for church. And so I would work up until enough time to go to Sunday school. And we had a relationship with the guy who owned the shoe shine parlor, that like you have to shine a path for him and a path for you, so you get paid. So I did that, and right on up, really through high school. But also the other reason, I don't know, they mentioned tobacco. Tobacco was a source of income for kids doing that, but I didn't like working in green tobacco. I did not. It was too hard to work, and the hours were too long. So I did everything I possibly could to make sure I didn't have to go in that tobacco field. And so from that, and we lived in the housing project, and in the housing project, they would allow you to keep your lawn up because they furnished the lawnmowers, the push lawnmower. So what I did, some of my customers, my paper customers who didn't have children, I'd ask them to let me do their lawns for them, And I had customers, throughout the neighborhood. I would check out a lawnmower from the office and keep it during the summer, and just do early in the morning. I would get up and do those lawns, and then when the kids would come home in the afternoon, from the tobacco field, I'm sitting up under the shaded tree, drinking Donald Duck orange juice, frozen Donald Duck orange juice. Not only that, I don't have all that tobacco gum on me, so to speak. But, and then after that, when the foster parents passed, the first one died in April of 49. And then, in fact, this is my neighbor, his mother. So they sort of took me under their arm because I was left with everything to do. And when she passed, I had to do everything, so to speak. When my mother passed, and I had no intentions of going to college. I never thought I needed a college education to learn how to make a living because I had been working at a very early age. I don't regret having gone to college. I think probably might have enhanced the opportunity that I'd received afterwards that. But she wanted me to go to college, so I went to college in honor of her. And when I finished college, I went into the military. And I was 23 months, 2 weeks and a day in the military. And that was one of the most rewarding experiences that I've ever had, because it opened up a great many doors for me. And that's pretty much it.
Mr. Dove?
Oh, well, I guess I better start from the beginning.
Yeah, okay.
I grew up in Mitchell Court, right across from Harold, and I learned an awful lot just growing up, watching, because when I was 5 years old, my mother and father divorced. There were 5 of us in the family. I had a sister, and then 3 brothers in a row. I'm the baby. When my father left, he left home. He came to me, gave me 14 cents, and said, "Give this to the boys." I gave a nickel to my older brother. A nickel went to me. I then went to my middle brother, and the 4 cents went to me. Of course, I thought I was rich. I learned to read at 4 years old. I used to sit in my mother's lap as she read the newspaper, and I would go, "What's that word? What's that word?" At 2 and 3, and before you know it, I could read. So when it came time to go to kindergarten, I went, but it only lasted 1 day. Second day, the teacher says, "Why are you bringing this boy here? He can read. Plus, he's causing all kinds of trouble." You know. So that was the end of my kindergarten career. I had to wait until go to first grade till the next year. Anyway, growing up in Kinston was really a delight, because I began to observe others to kind of take the place of my father. When my father was there, he delivered furniture for Quinn and Miller. And he had his truck. He'd bring the truck home, park it in front of Harold's house or in front of our house, and we'd be able to go on rides on weekends, etc. But of course, that didn't last long. My mother was basically a homemaker. What she did, she took in laundry, and when she couldn't make it by taking in laundry, she would do some seasonal work in tobacco factory. But she also had a side thing going. She made something called apple jacks and potato jacks, which were known throughout the area. And so we made out pretty good. But my brothers had started going to the golf ground, as we called it then, caddying at the Kinston Country Club. So, you pass down the tradition, and at 9 years old, that's what I did. I did it up to about 13, and I ran into a little problem. The guy who beat Jack Nicklaus in the National Juniors that year was the son of the pro at the Kinston Country Club. And he made a mistake one day and called me boy. So I jacked him up on a fence, and I didn't caddy anymore after that. So we had a good life. During summer times, I frequently would travel to the north, to Camden, New Jersey, or to Brooklyn, because I had relatives or siblings living in those places. So I got to see another aspect of life in the United States, other than Kinston, North Carolina, which was really good. I also at that point became an athlete. At Adkin High School, I went out for the football team, made it, and my mother wouldn't let me play. So subsequently I went out for the basketball team, And she didn't want me to play that either, because in Little League I had hurt my knees. Well, the first time I hurt my knees, I was on top of our gymnasium, and somebody watching the Globetrotters play, and somebody yelled police, and I jumped 20 feet in the dark. But so I was injured, and she really didn't want me to play. So anyway, I wound up being able to play sports, at least basketball. I learned to play tennis by watching people like John Dudley and Calvin Thompson. You know, I think they played too. Yeah, and just watching them is how I learned to play tennis. And one day I got a beat up racket, big hole in the middle, and I decided I'd get one of those waterlogged balls and try to hit it. And of course, you couldn't hit it in the middle, so that's how I learned to serve, by turning the racket. That way, you're not going to hit it in the middle. So, long story short, I subsequently did play basketball and tennis in college, but I learned from those experiences. I never took a lesson. Eventually, I did go to college at Fayetteville State University, where, again, I was going to play football, but the athletic director was the basketball coach. And he said, no way, no, after the first day. So I didn't. But you can play a spring sport. So the spring sport became tennis instead of track. Again, that whole experience was, for me, as I think somebody said before, I really didn't know I was poor. I was living in Mitchell and Courts. We had indoor plumbing there. I was able to travel in the summertime. I was able to, as they say, see different experiences. And I was able to experience some untoward kinds of things as I grew and got around. Didn't understand it initially, but came to learn what they meant. But we got through it.
I've got a,
Go ahead.
John wants to save the tape, I think.
Yeah, I would. Okay, we're back.
I wanted to ask a couple of follow-up questions, Mr. Dove, which will actually lead into some of the other follow-up, I think, for everybody. You mentioned at the end there some untoward things that happened, and you also talked about the incident at the country club and then the shout of police. And so I guess with the country club, I was wondering if you could, say what happened with that, whether you didn't go back because your family was concerned or because, what kind of... So I guess I'm interested in what race relations actually looked like and how they worked there in Kinston for Mr. Suggs.
That's an interesting question you have, because we all did some things similar. We all caddied at the country club.
Yes.
We all caddied at the country club, and that experience, it was almost like you wanted to do anything you could to stay out of the tobacco field. And caddying was one of the things that you could do because you could do it every day. And incidentally, there was one day that we were allowed to play.
Monday.
No, it was Wednesday. It was on Wednesday, but there was a caddy house, and that was run by a fellow African American, and it was. You see so many things that take place now that I tell my wife, it's like I've been a golf fan for a long time, but I wasn't able to play golf, because they were limited, and we used to take one club for everything, but that was it. But you had some experiences caddying, and you had some experiences based on the times that it was, and what you did, so to speak. And even caddying was hard work. For instance, you had to caddy 2 rounds, and you only got 65 cents. And you had 2 ways you could make some money. You could either caddy, or what they call now run down balls, or look for lost balls. You made more money finding lost balls than you did for caddying, because you could sell those balls, and then you could make more money. And so it was an experience that you really had to have lived it to relate to it. There weren't, I guess, for lack of a better, you knew where your limits were at the country club, so to speak. And there were some things that you didn't do, you didn't say, and it was just a way of life, so to speak.
That's where I'll take up, because I did not accept some of those limits. And when Larry Beck called me boy, that's his name, you can look it up. He beat Jack Nicklaus in National Juniors in 1957, I believe it was. When he called me boy that day, he shouldn't have done it, because I went at him and we fought and I won, and I left the country club and I just chose not to come back. I knew that if I did come back, it was because his father was a pro, that I probably wouldn't get any bags. At 9 years old, I started this, and I would carry 2 bags, 18 holes. Okay. Now I wasn't a little boy, because I'm always big, but I was hefty then, because I was kind of a rump, you might say, at that point. I just grew taller later, but I could handle myself.
I just want to say something about the tobacco field that everybody talks about avoiding. I did work with tobacco as a hand. We would be picked up usually about 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, very early, and we were carried to the employer's farm, and the primers in the field, which is what usually the men did. They in North Carolina, the tobacco leaves are taken from the stalk and put on a wagon and brought to the barn, and then the ladies are sitting or waiting around, and then there are some ladies that hand the tobacco out of the wagon to the loopers, and I did both. I did handing and looping, and early in the morning that wet tobacco is slapping in your face with with worms and whatnot. But I wouldn't say it was degrading, but it wasn't a very nice way to make a living. I think we were making something like $3 a day, and we would work until after all of the primers had finished priming the tobacco, and then we would have to hang up. That was the term for taking the tobacco that had been looped on the sticks and handing them to the guys that went in the barn. So dangerous, all up into the upper part of the barn to hang the tobacco so that it could be cured. And by the time we finished that, it was time to go. Gummy and nasty, and usually riding on the back of a truck back into the city. And that was usually what a day
Let me say,
consisted of.
the truck she's talking about was a truck was pulled by a mule. And you have to
Yes.
have a truck driver.
That brought the tobacco.
And I was a truck driver.
I was also.
But you have to be very careful, because if you made too sharp a turn, you pull the line too sharp, it would turn over. I turned one over one time, but they were all mad. But you learn the skill. So you go between the tobacco field and the tobacco barn. At the tobacco barn, they were the loopers and the handlers.
How many people would you be? Oh, so you're talking about the driver. You're talking about driving the tobacco.
Truck.
To the barn
But
for
the
them
truck
loop.
with the tobacco in it.
Yes.
Okay.
And the thing about driving the truck, once you get back in the field, you would have to wait until the truck is filled. And so in the meantime, you have a chance to look at who's the croppers. And I tell you, and so many lies are told, and so many jokes are told. A lot of folklore.
Yeah.
You can hear the guys, and that's the way the pastor, the singing and so forth, and it is that way they use to sort of kill the time and ease the pain of the job.
Yeah.
But yes, I was part of the Golden Leaf Tobacco, and that was part of the product that was produced.
Do you remember any of the songs?
Well, what's the song? Not necessarily the song, but the Shine Shine. You remember the
This
joke?
little light of mine.
This is like mine. I'm gonna let it shine. I'm gonna let it shine. You know.
Well, no, I mean, this is a joke in terms of how far, I can see. I remember one of the jokes. I can see as far as the Empire State Building. There's a fly on there. He's winking his eye at me. Different kind of, it's trying to competing and dozens and just different kind of things that,
Trying to make the day go.
make the day go by fast.
Ms. Dudley?
My experience, well, I have two things I want to talk about. Three. First of all, I worked with a Caucasian Jewish guy who married a white woman, and he was ostracized from his family, a very prominent family in Kinston, North Carolina, the Stadiums. I worked for H Stadium. He ran the ladies' shop. The other two brothers ran across the street the men's shop. Now, he had always wanted a restaurant. He said, Dudley, when you graduate, would you consider going to a chef school and run a restaurant for me? He liked me very much. And, but he used to travel also. Although he had his own store, he traveled around North Carolina selling clothes or samples for the stores to pick out. Once we got out of the city limit, he would let me drive. I didn't have a license. And when we got to a certain place we had to stay overnight, he would also first have to find me a place to stay. And if I went to that city often enough, I knew where I could stay. And so I was treated very well in terms of prejudice. But I do remember one experience that upset me. They had just established the bus in Kinston. It used to stop in front of the project, Mitchell Court. My mother and I got on, and I guess we sat about 5 seats from the back. There was a white guy who came on the bus, and he stood right beside my mother. There were only about 6 people on the bus. He stood beside her, and he said, Nana, aren't you going to get up and let me sit down? There were seats up front, there were seats at the back. And the bus driver happened to hear it. I'm 9 years old. I didn't understand that. But the bus driver said, look, man, we don't need this today. Come, take a seat wherever you can. There are plenty of seats up front. But I never forgot that. But in terms of being treated fairly, I did pretty good because H Stadium, I worked for him for 3 or 4 years. And we got along well. So that was my major experience with Caucasian individuals.
I need to take off on that because I had a bus experience. It was when I think I was 12. I had been to the country club, and that day I had money. I made money, so I took the bus home. Well, the bus stopped at Queen Street so that you can change. And from Queen Street, it would go through Lincoln City and back to Mitchell Court. Well, I got a seat that was just right opposite the back door and at Queen Street. And the next stop, which was just before it turned onto Lincoln Street, a white woman got on the bus and she had a bag. And somehow she made her way in front of me, even though I was on the inside. There was a white man sitting beside me. she stood there, and all of a sudden she asked for my seat. And she said, "I'm white." And I replied, "And so is toilet paper." Okay? And upon which time she called the bus driver who had made a stop. He came back, asked me to move to the rear of the bus. Well, by now we're in Lincoln City. So there were any number of black men who were in the back of the bus. And there were 2 or 3 who said, "Leave that boy alone." And he did. He went back and told the lady to come up and sit in there was a space right behind him that was tight, but to sit there. And he didn't say anything more about it until we got through Lincoln City and I got off the bus in Mitchell Court. But the next year, there was a lawsuit. A lady in our community named Miss Hannibal, Dr. Hannibal's wife, yes, filed a lawsuit with against the ICC because they issued the license for this bus company and challenged them. Well, within a year, that bus system did not exist, and today you go back to Kinston, there is no bus system in Kinston.
What was her, why was she challenging the bus system?
Because of separate seating on buses.
Because I was going to ask you about that, because you're describing a situation that sounds like it's somewhat integrated, even if it's not easy. Is that not the
The
case?
bus wasn't integrated.
The bus really was not integrated.
But
No.
Mrs. Hannibal's
Was an activist.
Mrs. Hannibal's husband was a doctor, and she was an activist. You know, even before, and very, very active in civil rights.
You're going to hear her name quite a bit because of that fact. Because we knew our mothers and fathers couldn't interact like she would, because she was independent. Her husband was a doctor, and so she could do pretty much things that need to be done in terms of activating the situation.
His clientele was all black.
Okay. All right. And Mrs. Stewart wants to say something, and then I have a couple of follow-up questions I'd like to clarify.
Because the men are talking, so I just want to get my little piece in with Francis. I had forgotten, but as a child, I always liked to work. Even, I like to do stuff. So I was out there trying. So Francis, I did get on one of those trucks with a group of kids, and on the corner, and go to work. And so what she told was what I experienced, in the barn, with handing. I was a hander. I didn't ever lose. But what happened to me was I got tobacco poison. Oh, so I had to go to Dr. Hannibal. So that ended my tobacco work. But also, I said, well, let me try the next thing. So I tried cotton. Well, cotton, you had to wear a sack, and you got paid by the pounds that you picked. So I think everybody tried to pick 100 pounds.
Yeah.
I probably picked maybe 20. So that was one day for me.
So you made about 80 cents.
Probably so, if that. But what I did do after that, I worked at a drugstore in Kinston called Standard Drugstore. And also, would you believe in Kinston, they had a drive-in drugstore. I didn't work at the drive-in, but that was something unique to Kinston. But I worked there for several years and was watched because blacks, Afro-Americans, could not sit down. So if they came in to get food, you had to go to a counter at the end and take your food out. So that was the experience there. But also I remember going into the 5 and dime stores. One was called Rose's. And you would walk up to get your candy, but if a white person came in, then they wouldn't wait on you. You had to just stand there and wait your turn. So one day, a group of us, we were in there trying to get candy, and they wouldn't wait on us, kept putting us back in the back of the line. And so finally one person said, give me this, all kind of different and then when they packed it up, they said, we don't want any of it. So we just walked out. So that was a way of trying to get back, you know,
Yes.
to make yourself heard. So little things like that we did subtle like. But those experiences were unique and special, you know, for us. But I always liked to work.
What was your job at the drugstore?
I was a waitress behind the counter. I waited on all the customers, you know, that came in and sat down. You know, they would place their orders, and we would take them to the table and what have you. And the ones that couldn't sit down, they would have to go to the end of the counter. We'd pack their lunch or food up, and they'd take it out.
So I think in some places that was a white job, but not in Kinston.
Pause 1 second.
Because you said it was not integrated.
No, well, I remember the bus, and it didn't last long.
I'm going to ask about the bus, but first I want to, because, you know, Ms. Stewart, you mentioned about your work and the men talking. I'm assuming that caddying was a job that the boys could do, but not the girls. Is that right?
That's
Right,
right.
that's
I don't
right.
know when the caddy
So that you had, so that part of what you all are describing is making choices within the options that's available, right?
Exactly.
And I was going to ask you, Mr. Jarmon, you mentioned the culture, the folklore in the fields with the tobacco. And you said you did that work and you caddied. I know a few of you have. And I guess I was wondering if you could think about, maybe I should ask about the bus first, but if you could think about sort of the pros and cons of working in the tobacco field with a larger group of African Americans versus, say, caddying, where you might be more isolated, walking with a white person or something.
I'd like to make a reflection on it. See,
Yeah.
First of all, that tobacco in the field, it was integrated.
Okay.
In the field, it was integrated. Simply because, the croppers, the people that were working in the field, you know, you had white guys who cropped tobacco along with the black guys. And believe it or not, there was a degree of camaraderie in the field working that didn't exist once you got out of the field. You know, so it weren't all blacks working in the tobacco. It was because most
Could be the farmer's son.
of the time it could be might even be the farmer himself. But there was a relationship in that atmosphere that was a little different after you got out of the tobacco field, so to speak. So it even down to drinking out of the same water bottle.
All right.
You know, because you know it was so hot, they would ask the trucker to bring them some water, and he'd bring a mason jar of water, and everybody would take a swig. You know, and that was it.
I'm remembering lunchtime in the tobacco field. Usually, and a lot of times, a lot of places that I worked, the owner's wife would prepare the food. She would leave the handing station maybe 30 minutes prior to lunch, and she would prepare lunch for everybody.
Okay.
And we would go to the house
Eat at
to
the table.
eat. And we did eat at the table. Yes, we did.
About how many people are we talking about working at a time on a farm?
Well, it depends.
Well,
Yeah.
what happened there? They had different farms, and the backer owners would come into town and pick up the number of persons he needed for that day, and would take them. So there were about 4 or 5 different farmers coming in,
Come at certain locations.
certain locations, and all of that. But about the food, that was pretty interesting because that depended on how much you made. In other words, if you carried your own lunch, that's one thing. They would always say, $5 a day if I feed you, $4 a day if you feed yourself.
Oh,
You remember that?
I don't.
Yeah,
Would that
I
be the
remember
other
that
way
many
around?
times. Was that?
Would that be the other way around? Did I hear that right? Would you make more money if you
If you took
fed
your own lunch.
yourself? Okay. Mm-hmm.
The primers or the croppers they referred to, they made more money than anybody else, and that was at 10 hours was $10, a dollar an hour. You worked in the field for 10 hours,
And this is in the 40s.
and this is in the 40s. And then you know the people that working at the barn, they make maybe $4 maybe $4 a
And
day.
is it mostly men in the field?
Men in the
women
field,
barn?
and
Yeah,
then women
women
under the
and
barn.
women at the barn.
No,
At the
And-
barn,
and is
looping.
and in the barn looping, that's integrated too, maybe with the.
Yeah,
Could-
Sometimes
could-
it could have been.
could-
yes.
Not,
could've
not
been.
in my case.
Not often.
Not often, not often.
Okay, so mostly not, but it could occasionally
Yeah,
be,
well-
depending on what the situation on the farm.
The farmer's wife, you know, she was usually at the barn because she'd leave there and go fix dinner. She'd leave at 11. She would leave at 11 and have dinner and have lunch ready at 12. I mean, it's a spread just like the Ponderosa, you know. And she'd leave at 5, and because you work from 7 to 6, but she'd leave at 11 and have lunch ready. She'd leave at 5 and have dinner ready.
Because oftentimes, some of the croppers spent the whole week with the employer on the farm.
Where would they stay?
What you,
Where did you?
Wherever, you know, you could stay at the back of the barn, you know, sleep under there, and you cook corn under the hot ashes, you know, and all. It was just as a way of life. Well, first you hadn't seen anything else different, so you know this is the way it happens, you know.
If it was Cunningham, you had little shanties there to
Yeah.
stay.
Shannon, you know,
Cunningham.
But
Yes.
there were times that women worked the field. There was something called suckers, that there are
Oh,
flowers
yes,
that grow on
yes.
top.
Mm-hmm.
They had to be nipped, and I understand they had to be nipped, otherwise it would stunt the growth of the plant. So they were nipped, and that juice would just get all over you.
Yes. Sucker.
But that's different from curing tobacco from that stage. It's an earlier stage in the growing of the tobacco plant itself.
Yeah, so that's earlier when it's growing, coming up
Yeah.
to pinch the suckers off
Yeah.
to make sure that it grows right. Yeah,
Yeah.
and then curing's after the harvest, part of the
Right.
harvest system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to
The
add.
curing is all the way through.
Okay.
On a given day, as she indicated, you would hang the tobacco up.
Mm-hmm.
The croppers in the field would do that. And then you would have maybe a caretaker who would, depending on what you use, would fire up the flute, yeah, and to cure the tobacco.
I just wanted to say at the end of the season, what was kind of rewarding was that they would have barbecue. And I don't know if Francis experienced that, but that was one of the best parts. You wanted to stay with that farmer because you knew that, and barbecue was something special in Kinston, North Carolina. It's nothing like North Carolina barbecue. I don't know if you've had it.
That'd be a big celebration. for all the
But they would
workers.
prepare the pigs and everything, and we'd sit at the end and just have a good time.
Don't
at the
forget
end
the
of season.
watermelon.
Oh yeah, but that you know, there's so much history. In fact, they had a radio station there, WFTC, World's Foremost
The
Tobacco
Tobacco
Center.
Center.
That's what
was
that's for World's Foremost Tobacco Center, and it's just. It's just so much. That's why I asked you, did you have the time? You know? Because everybody here could tell you a story for pretty much all day. And going back to the golf, North Carolina State had a group they called the Wolf Pack. They used to come. They used to play. They lived in the area, but they took over the Kinston Club on Wednesdays. They took the Wolf Pack, and I remember there was a guy who was very prominent golfer. He was a doctor. Called him Johnny Fabo.
Oh yeah.
Johnny Fabo was and Dr. Hadiak. They all came out, and I remember them because I used to caddy. I used to caddy for them. A guy named Slim and Mr. Boulder. I remember
Slim Montgomery.
he had a putter he called Bull Dick. You know, but he was one of the cheapest golfers though that I'd ever rode in for. You know, you got 65 cents for 2 rounds of caddy, and he'd give you $1 and want his 35-cent change back. You know, and I never forget that. But you know, those are some things that you just will never forget. You will never forget. But anything that you could do to stay out of that tobacco field, I did. And getting back to her father. And the beaches in Kinston, there was a pretty prominent name.
Right.
They used to sponsor a lot of talent that would come to town. I don't know, they had a lot of artists who used to come. They used to call it the chitlin circuit. One-nighters. You're like James Brown, Amos Milburn, Charles Brown, Ruth Brown, Buddy Johnson, Arthur Prysock, all those people.
Larry Donnell.
Larry Donnell. They would come to Kinston. Kinston was the hub. It was the hub. It was like it was right in the center between Camp Lejeune, Cherry Point, Fort Bragg, and Seymour Johnson Air Force Field. So on Friday night, everybody it was referred to as K-Town. Really, it was during the war. It was referred to as K-Town, and it was like they had a red light district too. They had a red light district. Everything that you wanted, you could get if you knew where to get it. And I was going to say that's when I began my entrepreneur.
Unusual place.
Yes, it was.
What happened was I was scaffolding before it became prominent up here. Scaffolding is good because the servicemen had to come to Kinston and buy their tickets, but they had to get in line, so to speak. So it would cost $2 to go to the dance. But, I used to buy a bunch of tickets and wait until the servicemen would come. Because I would tell them, like, you can pay me $2 and you don't have to stand in line and you got more time. But I was buying them for $1.50. And I was selling them for $2.
That's a pretty good markup.
Oh, no question.
Mr. Dudley?
Now, the interesting thing about Kinston, being around those base and Army bases,
Marine bases.
meant that we had to grow up real fast. Because we had sisters, and many times those sisters would come in and kind of plot to take over. But we had to defend the rights of our sisters, and that meant we had to do some little things that we didn't really want to do. But we did what we had to do to defend our honor and our sisters. And that was every weekend. And they used to come to town, and practically every weekend, going back to camp, you would hear of some major accident. I would say on a monthly basis, you would have these 3 soldiers being killed during that month. Having looked it up and going back to the base.
What kind of incidents would you have with your sisters?
Well, they came in to date the girls. Many times they were our girlfriends. And many times we had to confront them. And if they didn't want to cooperate and leave your girlfriend alone, you had to deal with it in the dark. That's much more to say about that.
But I was going to add that my father did run a club. It was a private club on North Street. And there was another club before his club called the Cotton Club. But on Friday night when those soldiers came in, you could not get down. That's just, they just came in droves. They would not only be in the club, my father had a window that he could look out because his customers, they were screened. He didn't let anybody come in. But they would just, if they couldn't get in the club, then they would stand in the street, and they would just congregate. It was just an amazing kind of thing that they loved. But I guess it was, like you said, it was a hub.
Yeah, it was
and so they all came to Kinston. It was sometimes called like the Little New York.
Sugar Hill.
Yeah.
And I guess we have to remember the times. There probably weren't any other places
That's true.
that they could go because mostly the black soldiers, they were just like us. We were black and we had our problems.
Right.
So they had their problems as far as places to go. Yeah.
And was this mostly during the war, or was it after the war as well?
It was after the war.
After the war.
Somebody mentioned the war, and I wanted to make sure, because it sounded like it kept going.
Yeah, it was definitely into the 50s.
Let me ask one question that I hope is easy to help the transcriber out. Can somebody spell, is it Mitchellum Courts?
Mitchell, Mitchell,
Mitchell Courts.
Mitchell Wooden.
Mitchell Wooden Court.
Mitchell Wooden Courts.
So how do you spell Wooden?
W-O-T-E-N.
Okay. Okay, and then I want to go back to the buses. You said, you all said that they were segregated, but you mentioned that you were sitting next to a white man.
I
A
was
white man
sitting-
was sitting next to you.
Yeah, he was sitting next to me.
Okay. So how does that work in the context of the segregated buses? Was it
Well, I
somewhat
was sitting
flexible?
first, and he came on.
Right.
As a matter of fact, he came on in front of the woman.
Oh, I think what you mean. There wasn't a white bus and a black bus, so to speak. It was a transit system
Yeah.
that picked up throughout the community, and you know, blacks and whites were allowed to ride the bus.
Right.
There weren't two separate bus lines, so to speak.
I think her point is, why were they sitting on the same bus together?
On the same seat.
Yeah.
The same
together.
seat.
Oh, yeah.
But the point is, whites have always had a privilege to do what they want to do and sit where they want to sit, but you couldn't do it vice versa. That was the essence of it. And I recall one experience. I must have been about 5 or 6 years old, and you have these little strings on the bus,
You know.
and I was pulling them and just playing with it. And the guy, the blonde-headed fellow, said, "Woman, shut that boy up." And I remember that today, with the sarcasm and all those kind of things. And she said, "Yes, sir," or something. But we were almost on Simon Bright. I also went on Bright Street by the Simon Bright Apartments. That's where we got out and I walked, because I lived between the white and black community.
Now there was unwritten rule that white folk sat up front, and there was and black folks sat in the back. Now, if the bus began to get crowded, black folk would have to get out of their seats in the back and start moving back. As the bus got crowded, more white folk come in, black folk had to move to the back, because white folk normally didn't sit behind the black folk.
The line of demarcation on the buses normally was the back door, which was on the side. And where I was sitting at that time was right there on that seat. And when the white fellow sat beside me, he didn't ask me to get up. Okay? The woman came behind him and didn't ask him to get up. She asked me.
Right. And so is that the kind of, so I understand what you're saying about the prerogative. And so is that something that was it typical or occasional that whites might do something like that and sit down like that man did and not make an issue of it, and then in other times they would make an issue like the woman who did come in behind?
Well, as somebody said, it's the kind of thing that it was kind of understood where your place was.
You had a place.
And most people would just acquiesce and move.
Yeah.
And that would be done on a regular basis. I just didn't that day.
Right.
Let's pause for a second. Why don't you start talking about the drugstore then?
Actually, I got a question first, though. So, you said that a number of African American men at the back of the bus said that they should leave you alone.
Yes.
And that was when the bus was in the black community, Lincoln
Yes,
City,
it was in the black community
which
at
was a
that
rough
moment.
part of the city.
Yes,
And so
Lincoln
there was
City.
a sense that,
That he knew he better kind of back off.
so there's this prerogative and there's this understanding and there's
Yes.
this place, but then there's also this space to say,
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you feel when they did that?
Oh, I felt that I was taking a chance, number one, doing what I did, but when I heard these voices in the back, I said, oh boy. I was gratified to hear it, but I didn't expect it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The drugstore?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which standard was it? Was
Number
it the
2.
one- Okay, well, I
Standard
worked
drug number 2.
I worked there.
This was 2 weeks after Greensboro, the sit-ins, February of 1960. I was a senior in high school, and I had cooked up kind of a scheme to integrate standard drug number 2 with a couple of friends, brothers, Curtis Henderson and Tom Henderson. I asked Curtis to dress as an African diplomat, and he did. His brother was going to be a lookout. We were going to standard drug number 2 to get him served. I was going to be his interpreter. I knew that Ghana had just gotten its freedom the month before. And when we went into standard drug, he sat at the counter, and I told him all he needed to say was Umgawa and some derivative thereof. And he would say that to me. He wouldn't say it to anyone else. And I would interpret for him. And I was going to interpret in French. So I let the waitress know what he wanted to eat and that he was a diplomat from Washington. He had the appropriate dress on and so forth. She didn't know what to do, but she wrote the order down, the waitress.
No, wait, no. Did she understand French?
No, I talked to her in English,
Okay.
but
So where does the French come in?
that was what I was saying to the diplomat,
Okay.
okay? He wasn't replying to me in French. He was only using
Alright.
what he heard on Tarzan,
Right.
okay? Umgawa, blah, blah, blah. Well, anyway, she got confused and decided to call a manager over. It was a young white fellow.
Yeah.
And I explained to him, same thing I'd explained to her. And he looked really confused, but I was resolute, and he asked me to put the order in. I had convinced him that this was an African diplomat, and you didn't want to have a diplomatic problem here. So the order goes in, and a friend of mine who lived in my building in the projects
What?
started, her name,
I remember.
she started to bring the order out. We had ordered toast, coffee, and eggs. And she saw us standing there, and she turned around real quick and handed the order to the original white waitress and said, "You take it." And then she turned and went back in the kitchen. So she bought it, and sure enough, he was served. And we stood there, and we were. I'm dying inside, but I'm being resolute. And he was eating, and Tom was looking, and to make sure no police came. And sure enough, we were able to get through the meal, and we were able to pay for it. And as we were leaving, her name was Olive.
Right.
Olive came out and saw us leaving. You could see nothing but teeth. We got outside and we ran back to East Kinston as fast as that you could. We must have broken a 100-yard dash that day. True story. Yes.
And when I was working at Standard, Olive and I worked together, so I knew exactly what he was
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah, I thought she was going to drop the dish when she saw us. I never sat. I stood all the time and did the interpreting, and I didn't eat.
So they didn't recognize you. They didn't know you from around town.
No.
And so it wasn't a place that you went on a regular basis.
I had been there, but they didn't know who I was.
It wasn't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, we took joy in doing things like that because we knew we couldn't do it, real. So I remember once my sister, we went to the drugstore. I can't remember if it was number 1 or number 2, but the place was filled with white people, and so we had to wait and wait and wait. And she had put in a prescription, and it took them so long. I know it must have been at least 25, 30 minutes. She says, well, when they bring it, I think I'm going to just drop it. So when they finally brought the prescription and handed it to her, she didn't pay them, but she just dropped it. And somehow that just gave us so much satisfaction because they had made us wait so long. So we just took pride in doing little things like that we knew we could get away with. Mm-hmm. And so when we dropped it, of course, we left.
One other thing on that point.
Mm-hmm.
My sister, the one that's next to me, Hilda, used to go into the department stores. They had black water, white water. Mm-hmm. She used to take delight in going to see what white water tasted like.
It was colored.
Colored, yeah,
Colored.
colored. white and colored. And so she would go and taste it. And that became kind of a thing to do. Because later on, my sister-in-law used to do it as well, Yvonne. So,
I think we've all done that.
yeah.
Just to see.
I didn't try
the
that.
difference.
But it was the kind of thing, it was,
Yeah.
you know, you're faced with situations and you can say,
In
what
almost
can I
every
get away
store,
with?
you have those water fountains, one black, one white.
Yeah.
Were they equivalent in Kinston, or were they obviously, you know, because some of them had the coolers, some of them, the white ones had the cooler and the black one didn't?
It depended on the store.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, another subtle way of getting back. I was an avid baseball fan as a child. Won a glove. They pulled my name. When I went to get my glove, the question was whether they're going to award it to me at the ballpark. But did the right thing and gave me my glove. But it was the Kinston Indians was a team, still this today. And right beside the stadium, there was a railroad track. And there were some supplies in there. Budweiser beer. And we could get in the car. I don't know, Jackie, were you ever part of
I know about it.
You know about it. Okay. Well, anyway, my brother and I, we were pretty good guys. But we had some of that beer also. We would take the beer, maybe 3 bottles, or they had the big size, and put it in the screen behind the Mitchell Court and cool it. We had a good time with the beer for about 3 months until they found out what was going on, and they took some of the guys to court. But they did not implicate my brother and I. I know I had at least 2 quarts of beer. But they didn't implicate us because we were supposed to be pretty good guys. So they got the guys in court and said, how many beers you drink? He said, 1. How many? 2. How many? 3, maybe. And that went on and on and on and on. But that was just a subtle way of getting back. Subtle way of getting back.
Were most of your interactions with whites either through work or in public places like the drugstore?
Well, I indicated that I lived on Reed Street, which was at the edge of Lincoln City. It is either going into or coming out. But next to me was a apartment complex called Simon Bright, mostly poor whites. And they were not much any better than we were in terms of finance and so forth. But there was a guy called Bo, a little white fellow about the same age, 9, 10. And we would go out to the sand hole. We had sand holes. Didn't have swimming pools then. And we would go out and swim and then come back. But that was my type of experience, except that, like Jackie, I shined shoes as well. And I wouldn't have to go through the apartments. I couldn't. They were not well-to-do enough in the apartments to have the shoes shine. So I had to walk through the apartments to the better class of white, not say better class, economic class. And I shined shoes and walk all the way to the bus station. And we shine the shoes and come back. And that is what I did on Sunday mornings. And so I had my money that I was making that time all the week. So that was my experience with
My experience was sort of negative because I also loved to go to the movie. And in order to get to the movie, I had to walk down Main Street, pass by the white theater to get to the black theater. And invariably, these white kids knew we were coming. And that was a tough time. They threw rocks. Every Saturday, they'd be in waiting for us. They threw rocks. And that was a very harmful experience because we just have to do a lot of running. A lot of running. The girls didn't have that experience probably.
Well, I
We
did.
You did?
I not going to the movie, but I used to ride my bicycle to my aunt's house I lived on Shine Street, which was, I guess, lower Kinston, and my aunt lived on Macon Street, which was a little distance. And I had to go. We used to ride the bicycle through the mill, which was so dangerous. It was the wood mill, I believe. And right there, immediately after I would leave the mill, I went into what we used to call, it was a very bad white section. And one day, I was cornered by these white boys, and they took my bike and knocked me off my bicycle and spit on me. And I got up and finally got to my aunt's house. But I did that. That happened to me once. But it was a frightening time to go through that area again, but it did happen to us too.
Did they keep the bike? Were you able to get the bike
No,
back?
they gave me the bike. They just
They
wanted to.
They just harassing you?
Yeah, just
knock
harassed
you off
me.
and
Just
all that, and
harassed
then-
me. Yeah.
Let me, pause first. We're back.
So maybe we could talk about the school walkout now. I think we could probably keep on with these stories for a long time.
It's fascinating stuff, though.
We just skimmed the surface.
Just skim the surface.
I think we all know. But can somebody start us off with maybe where the idea, what you remember about where the idea for the walkout came
I'm
from,
the guy.
Mr. Dudley? All right.
It had happened in our class, the class of 1952. Okay. We were a class of individuals who probably started from kindergarten to 12th grade. 80% of us were together throughout our school experience. So through that process, there was a lot of trust, a lot of helping each other get through school, and that followed from first, third grade all the way to 12th grade. Now, so that kind of tells you about the interaction and the love we had for each other. Okay, out of that, we used to have a civics class on Wednesday. We talked about different things in the community, responsibility in the real world. But this particular day, Ms. B.C. Davis, Huzzy now, B.C. Davis, she was our teacher. She was a very motivational teacher and a very serious teacher. And that day we were doing our weekly reader, and the topic for that day was what an ideal school has. What an ideal school had. So we saw all those items a good school has. We asked Ms. Davis, is there a school in our area that has these things? She said, yes, the school up on the hill, the white school, Granger High School. So, being civic-minded and a class that was very serious, and we were considered the elite school class in the school. We had A and B. A was college preparatory class, and the B mainly the person who was going into a trade or whatever. So we're sitting there looking at each other. So we said, Ms. Davis, just spontaneously, could you leave the room? And she didn't relent. She said, okay, I'll leave. So we began to discuss how we can go about getting some of the things we needed. So we came up with 8 items. Now, why we had her to leave the room, because we wanted to discuss this, and that was a good thing, because we didn't want her to get involved in any of this process as the teacher having started something. And here we had some pretty dynamic kids.
She must have had an idea. Of what
She
you
had
were
an
thinking,
idea, maybe.
or at least,
No, she didn't have an idea because when I'll tell you something that happened later, and what you'll read is that she didn't know what the heck was going on.
Right.
She really didn't know what the heck was going on. But anyway, we began to discuss.
can I just interject? What I'm curious about is the idea of a teacher walking out and leaving students. So I guess she must have trusted you at least at some level.
The class
Yes.
itself. She knew we were very responsible kids, and Jackie and Francis, and they'll tell you, our class was kind of special. And they trusted us. And you'll find the trust later on. So we began to discuss the things that we wanted to do. First thing we said, hey, let's put down the items or the things that we need and find out when the school board meet and petition the school board to get these things in our school. Okay, so we called the school board. We found out the school board meet on Monday. We asked them we would like to come in and meet with them, a group of Adkin High School students, seniors, all seniors. And they said yes. They didn't ask what we wanted or anything. They allowed us to come. So during that week, that Wednesday to the Friday, prior to going that Monday, we decided alternative plans in case if the board didn't respond appropriately. Do something with that. We decided to meet with the students. We brought the other class in, of the 12th grade, because we wanted them to be a part, and some juniors.
Okay.
And we made them a part of the discussion after we had gotten pretty much what we wanted to do. Basically, we met Stewart, the principal, allowed us to meet in the auditorium first without any teachers around. Because here again, he knew the class and that we were considered responsible kids.
Is the meeting during class time or is it after school?
No, during class time,
Okay.
the first meeting. Now the next meeting was met in the old barn. We're strategizing and organizing. We said now, if the board didn't give the proper response, we're going to walk out. We hadn't decided what the proper response would be. So, that week, leading to Monday, we strategized. And we had everybody on board, 720 students. We told them not to tell your parents or your teacher what's going on. And do you believe to this day, 2013, nobody's ever told me that an adult knew what was going on. Kids.
How many were in your class?
About 25, 30. Okay. So, we had our little plan set. The sign was, Carolyn Stewart has lost her red pocketbook. Carolyn Cofield. Thank you, dear. Has lost her red pocketbook. If anybody finds it, please bring it to the office. So, we met with the board that Monday, around about 7 o'clock. They called us in about 7:30, maybe 8. I said, okay, you kids can come in. There were 7 of us, but the committee, we were the committee of 5 to go in and move the board. We had our thing all typed out. We gave it to the superintendent board. He looked at it. He passed it to the next person, 5 board members. They passed it around. They said, would you excuse us for a minute? And we left the room. Maybe about 8-10 minutes, they called us in. They said, who sent you? That was the first thing they asked us, who sent you? We said, nobody sent us. You can tell us who sent you. Nobody sent us. So they said, look, what you kids are asking for, it's not in the budget for the next 10 years. We looked at each other. We walked out. We said, thank you very much. We left. That was on Monday. That Tuesday, the announcement was made. Now, there's some little confusion about that because I did announcements every morning, about 5-6 minutes of what's going to happen for the day. Frederick Thompson and myself. And I really made the announcement. We made it together. The secretary always wanted to say that she made the announcement. So you may come into that. But I made the announcement. Even if I didn't make it, I told her what to say because that was the line for everybody to get out of the seat. And do you believe, when I made the announcement, 720 students got up out of their seats, orderly, went and picked up the placards that we'd already made up in case the board didn't respond properly, and we marching down Queen Street. Marching down Queen Street. No incidents. People were curious to what was going on. Teachers running around, what's going on, what's going on? And we gone. These kids trusted us tremendously. And I've cried many times since I've thought about it. What could have happened? Because these 2 members of the school board came to our school to get those 5 kids together who met with us. Bring them in. They brought us in. We're out of school, however, but we are still around the school strategizing because we had to have a plan as to when the kids were coming back and all of that. This is a Monday. So they told us that, look, you're seniors. You'll never benefit from what you're asking. I said, there is a benefit because we have brothers and sisters. And quality education is very important. They said, but if any of those kids, 720 kids, get into any problems in the community while they're out of school, you guys are not going to graduate. Well, we said, so be it. We'll take our chances. So that happened. We didn't go back to school until the next Monday after Thanksgiving. And we went on back. We gave the announcement to the kids. We had key people to call, key numbers, and that got everybody back. 720 students came back that Monday after Thanksgiving. Same way they walked out. And that was pretty much it. But there wasn't some situations. It was the coldest day of the year. And Jackie lived on the front row. See, we all congregated a theater across the street from the projects. They knew exactly where to come. We marched down the street. We dispersed there. But it was a cold day. And Jackie had quite a few of the kids to come to his house.
I went to the Carver Theater.
Yeah, we went to the theater, so the Carver Theater. And Jack got into trouble for that. But at any rate, that's pretty much what happened. But during that time, Dr. Hannibal, his wife, what was her name?
Alice.
Alice.
Allison. They were my next door neighbor.
Being independent, because her husband didn't have to cater to anybody. And that's why we didn't want our parents to know, or our teachers, what was going on because we didn't want anybody to lose his job. We had all that figured out.
I have
At 17, 18 years of age.
I have a number of follow-up questions, but before I ask those, I was wondering if some of the rest of you could say when you heard about it or how you found out or what your reactions were, whether you knew before the announcement, those kinds of things.
Well, I think that the president of our class was a part of the committee. So he was feeding the information back to us.
What did you think when you heard about it?
You know, I really didn't think too much of it. I thought it was a great thing to do. I was afraid, very, very much afraid, because I was wondering, when I get home, what in the world am I going to say to my parents, you know? But I went along with the crowd.
What did you say to your parents?
Well, they asked me, and they were very, very kind about it and loving about it. They asked what we had done and if we had thought about it, and I told her yes. And there were no punishments for that, for anything. So I felt real good about that.
Yeah.
Well, what I guess our parents must have thought, they knew that we had second class everything. The books, anything we got was passed on from the white kids to us. And sometimes they were torn pages and, you know. So I guess underlying, when our parents found out about it, they didn't have a problem with it. They just couldn't say anything or be a part of it, you know. And since 720 of us had walked out, the school board, they knew that they couldn't do anything to us because we were kids, but they could do something to our parents and community. So they didn't say anything. Our parents never said anything about it. So, you know, the thing was to get us back in school because they didn't know if we had a plan B or a plan C. So they were anxious to get us back because that was a way that they thought they could keep us under control. And even my husband, who is deceased now, he walked out too. His father was our principal, and he didn't even tell his father, you know. So it was a thing that we kept our mouths shut. In many cases, we were afraid, you know. But we felt like if everybody else was going to do it. And then when we met with the leaders, the teachers weren't around anyway.
Yeah.
And they
allowed
told
us to meet.
Yeah, they allowed us to meet. They weren't, and so they told us what to do, and we just followed along.
And during that procession, as we were going
Wasn't that
downtown,
amazing?
there was
no
no
talking. We just rose up,
Absolutely no talking.
just like I don't know how. It was just a strange kind of feeling. You just rose up when that announcement was made. I was on the top floor. I don't know where you were. And we just walked quietly on out, picked up whatever we were supposed to pick up, and went on down the main street or wherever those they told us to go. It was just an amazing kind of thing that happened, and you just did it.
And
I want to ask a question.
go ahead.
You said that you made placards. So where did you place the placards so that the administrators didn't see it?
Well, I think the kids did a good job of hiding them. We didn't have them to bring them any particular place, but we told them, be careful how you do it. And they did it. However, cause I don't recall us saying bring all the placards to a certain place. We didn't do that. But when we walked out, wherever they got them, they had them.
Yeah.
And we were going down Main Street.
You remember what any of them said? Do you remember what any of them said?
Nobody said anything.
I said a placard.
Placards,
What on the sign?
quality education, and things like that.
It was my understanding, of course, I'm a fourth grader now, that the placards were all off campus.
Oh yeah, they weren't at the school.
Oh no, we didn't do them at school. They did them off campus.
Yeah, maybe at the Carver Theater or somewhere around Mitchell Wooten.
I think that most of them ended up at the Carver Theater.
Yeah.
Did any of the teachers, what did they say? Did they try to stop you as you're getting
They were
off the
amazed.
canal?
They didn't
They
know
just
what was
shocked.
going on.
Let
They were
me
shocked.
say that,
You had
my class was the first class. I was seventh grade, and they were the upperclassmen. But I had a very religious-oriented teacher. I won't call the name. And when we heard all the walking, all the steps, what's going on? And maybe our class leader said that we're marching. No, you're not. And she stood from the door, and until we would exchange class. I think the next class would be my math class down the street, down the hallway. And so we went out then. But by that time, they were gone. I had gone already. And we went out and stayed by the flagpole until they got back. And then we became a part of the group. but that was my individual class. But the class leader in our class knew what was going on because he had met with the other group, but she would not participate.
So you didn't know what was going on really until...
No, I knew after because the student representative, she simply barred the door.
Right, and so after you got down to the flagpole, then that's when you...
And then they were in separation.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were well schooled. Now, believe it or not, the five of us expressed no fear. We never even felt anything but let's do this because it's needed. And even to this day, up until 2010, we didn't even talk about it. We never met as a group to discuss what we had done. And even to 2010, it did not strike me as the significance of what happened. 2010, when we did a reenactment of the situation, because it wasn't for publicity. We want to raise the awareness,
The significance of it.
of it. And the beauty of it all, as you'll probably read later, that 10 years turned into 18 months. Everything we had petitioned, 8 items, and you'll read about those, were built in 18 months. We had all gone to college. When we came back, that's when we saw what had happened.
How did you make the decision to go back on that Monday? Had you gotten assurances? Because the little bit I've read from the newspaper, which I understand is one kind of source, says that the school board, the superintendent kept saying, well, we don't have the money for that and I can't promise that, etc. So what is your recollection and how was that decision made?
Well, the decision was made because we knew that we had done what we had to do. We couldn't stay out for 10 years. That's a fact. So the 5 of us got together in the committee and said, let's get them back in. On that weekend, we made the decision that we would call key people that we had already designated to call key numbers, and everybody got the message. We had it pretty well coordinated. I'm continuing to be amazed.
Did you do that because you felt like you had made the point you could make and that there wasn't more you could do?
Exactly.
Did you have a sense that your demands would be met within 18 months or within a certain time period, or you just didn't know? You felt like you made the point?
We made the point. We'd done as much as we could do. Now, there were some reaction. Dr. Hannibal, Alice Hannibal, she wrote some letters to the school board and the paper expressing her civic feelings. Now, she got some threats. She got some threats.
What kind of threats?
That to bomb our house or burn it down. So there were 6 seniors who spent a week at her house. And I don't like to talk about, we were ready. That's much I'm going to say about that.
So you were staying at her house
We
in
stayed-
response to these threats to try to
to
make
her.
sure that she was safe?
She was safe. 2 to 3 of us stayed for a week. I stayed 3 nights. I remember going from her house to school every morning.
Were there threats against any of your families?
No, not that I know of.
Not that I know of.
See, because they didn't say anything, they didn't have any.
Nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
And that doesn't always
It,
stop
it,
people.
it,
Well-
it came back to
it
the
does.
students, and they didn't know what we were gonna do,
Yeah.
so. And they didn't talk about it. It wasn't talked about.
Really?
Well, there was one thing that happened in my family. Remember, I told you my mother took in laundry, and Jake Strother, who was the editor, I believe, at the time of the Free Press, was was one of her customers. He did ask her what she knew about that activity. And of course, all she could tell him was, I don't know anything. Which is to say that if she did know something and had told him, given him some kind of inference, that he would have used that as an economic thing to withdraw support of her.
So basically people, as far as you know, took it at face value that only the young people knew, and so they didn't actually try to use pressure through the parents.
No.
Because in some places they would do that.
Surely.
Yeah.
You mentioned before that one of your classmates was the principal's son. Your husband?
Yes.
And so, what was the principal's position on how did he respond to this situation?
Well, John can tell you what he said.
Well, when the teachers were running around trying to find out what's going on, he made one statement. Leave those kids alone. That's all he said. And even when the school board came out the next day, that Wednesday, he was very calm. He admitted that he didn't know the situation, but it happened. And he didn't show any emotion. As I remember, he was in the room. He was cool. He was a good man. He was just a good man. And I guess deep down within, he understood.
So it sounds like at least a number of your teachers and your principal were probably supportive of you, even though they were limited in their ability to express this.
That is very true.
Yes.
That's a good one.
That's a good way to put it. Because even to the point they allowed us to meet on 2 or 3 occasions without any teachers or adults being around,
That seems
that's
very
amazing.
significant, yes.
It's very significant.
Yeah. So,
I want to ask a point of clarification. What were the grade levels at your school?
From the 7th through the 12th. And I was 7th grade that year, and Dudley was 12th grade. President of the class too, were you not?
Yeah. No, vice president.
Vice president.
Frederick
Frederick,
always beat me up. Always. I was always second.
so about a little over 100 students in each grade?
Each grade.
No more than 2 7th, no.
Did they have 2 7th grades?
Only just 2 7th grade
2
classes.
7th grades.
7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So that would be 6 grades and 720 students. So I'm trying to figure that out.
We had like A and B,
A and B and
college prep. And
yeah. I think each grade had at least 2
correct.
classes.
Right, okay.
At least 2.
2 sections. A
Two
and B
sections.
section.
That was,
Yeah.
A and B section.
but when it all ended up, we received state of the art. Our gymnasium was state of the art.
Largest building on the East Coast.
We had the home economics suite. We had what else? We had classroom, band room.
And
Everything we asked for.
Yeah, everything.
And so this.
And more.
So
And
you
more.
said 18 months, so I'm thinking, so this is like mid 53. So this is while the Supreme Court's actually considering Brown is one of the new facilities. So this is in at least the backdrop that probably the school board and superintendent are at least somewhat aware that the Brown case is going on.
And there was a similar case up in Virginia, but not led by the students.
I wanted to ask about that, but yes, sir.
I can give you context on that whole scenario. There was a case in Virginia, which was led by the daughter of NAACP president.
Barbara Johns.
Yes. And there's a case in South Carolina, one in Delaware, and the one in D.C., and of course the one in Kansas. Had we litigated, that case would have been joined with the one that would ultimately became Brown versus Board, but we did not litigate. And the other unique thing about it, of course, course, you just stated, is that this was completely student-led, no adults really involved. Barbara Johns' father advised them all along the way.
Family, I need you okay, we're back.
I actually wanted to ask that because your walkout is November 51, is that right?
Right.
And in Prince Edward County, the walkout that led to the case coming out of there at Moton High School was organized in late April of 1951.
Right.
And so I wondered, I know that they got some publicity, and so I wondered if any of you had been aware of that, or if this is, like one of those situations where students in a number of places are having similar reactions.
No.
No,
That
no, you
was
didn't.
never part of our discussion when we organized this thing. We didn't know about that
You
situation.
didn't know about it. Yeah. It's interesting that students in
Yes.
multiple places are coming up with the same initial strategy. Now, you mentioned that you were reading in the Weekly Reader about the what's an ideal school, and you asked your teacher where would one of these be. Did you all have much awareness of what the white schools were like at that time in the community, or think about those differences?
Yes, to some degree, especially with the athletic department. We knew they were on a level higher than us, simply because our athletic equipment, and we had a pretty good athletic team, basketball and football.
Oh, yes. Great.
Our equipment were hand-me-downs from Granger High, and we only got those because we had a young man, Mr. Busby, who worked for the recreation department, and he used to work. We didn't have what little boys and girls club like they have now, but he knew that we needed some equipment from which to participate, and he used to go and collect that used equipment that Granger High had and bring down to us. And when I think about it now, it's a miracle that some of us are still alive with the inadequate equipment that we used for our athletic teams, especially our football program. We had what we called them Halloween helmets, but what they call lanterns. We used for helmets, headgear. By the grace of God, none of us got seriously injured. And in 1953, after they graduated, we won the state championship for North Carolina. We won the state championship. We beat the Little Blues of Raleigh for the Eastern Championship. We beat Dudley High for the state championship. And we didn't have a place to play. We had to have the championship for the state of North Carolina football in 1950, school year 52-53, was held in Kinston, North Carolina. And we had to play that at Granger High Stadium because we did. And the only reason we got to play there is because our coach and Granger High's coach, Mr. Grass was his name, but the Granger High coach was Mark. Frank Mark. And our coach, coaches, that there wasn't so much of that with coaches. He knew we had a good athletic team, and he had them to give us permission to play the state championship game in that stadium. And here you would have thought, being the state champion, we would have had the support of the community. Not to mention the fact that when we got ready to get awards in our jackets, what we had to go through to be recognized as being state champions of the state of North Carolina.
Let's go back. Let's go to the gym.
Can you say some more about what you had to go through to receive the awards?
Or not the awards, I mean to get recognition, to get, in other words, you win a state championship, you get jackets and emblem, but in most instances the community would grab you and give you the support. We didn't get that. We had to do fish fries and raise all kind of money to raise the money to get people to get jackets for the championship football team.
In other words, there were no awards, dinners.
There were no awards, there was no recognition,
Yeah.
But we went undefeated our senior year. We only had 2 points scored on us our whole senior year, and that was a visiting school from New Bern, North Carolina. They came, we played them, we beat them 7-2 for the Eastern, for the chance to represent the East in Raleigh during the Thanksgiving holidays. And we went to Raleigh, and this game was broadcast in Raleigh. And we beat the Little Blues in Raleigh, and then we played Dudley High the following week for the state championship. So.
And the year before that, we had a team that went 8-2. I played on that team.
Yeah.
So, but I wanted to get to the gymnasium. As you're going to read, the gymnasium was built by students.
So is this
The
part
early
of,
one.
of
The early
like,
one.
And
is this part of like shop class? or
Yeah,
is
that's
this
right.
part of-
Vocational education. Yeah.
they built the gym. And the gym was so small that everybody almost was touching the line. It had no seats.
You can imagine this being the gym. This right here is a good example of this is the floor. This is the floor, and everybody else is standing around during the game. That's the gym floor.
And the potbelly.
And on cold days, you had a pot-bellied stove, and somebody could have gotten seriously injured. And so there were a lot of things. I remember one game where, oh, I should tell this, but anyway, I'll tell it. One of the girls from the other team took the ball out of bounds, and somebody stuck a pin in her. And she went to the ref, and the ref said, "Who did it?" And she pointed at me. And Miss Davis, B.C. Davis, saw them walking me across the floor to put me out of the game. And she said, "Wait a minute, what's going on here?" She said, no, the ref said, "He's been accused of having stuck a pin in one of the opposing players." Miss Davis said, "No, indeed. Take him back." Dudley didn't do that, and I didn't do it. But another thing that brought significance to the situation was that Althea Gibson, the great Althea Gibson, played for 2 years in that gym. And she would always beat our team by herself. She was a great athlete. And I just threw it in a sidebar.
What were the circumstances of her playing in that gym?
Oh, she
Because she was Wilmington, North Carolina.
Williston. She played for another high school, Williston, North Carolina.
Which was close
Williston
to
High School.
Williston High School, which is located in Wilmington.
And girls used to dribble 2 times and had to pick the ball up and pass it.
Half court.
Half court. But she was so great that I guess she was a great part in them using the full court because she was fantastic. She could have made any men's team.
We talked about the deficient equipment. Adversaries used to describe the helmets we wore in football as TAMs. That's how bad it was.
It's like that much help to protect you.
None whatsoever.
But our gym was burned down, right?
Jackie, you want
Want to describe that?
It was an accident.
How did that happen, Jackie?
It was an accident.
That was a
Is there more
timely
to the
accident.
story of that?
Well, you know, I don't know, but actually, what happens is the girls' basketball team was our biology teacher, our homeroom teacher. He was way ahead of his time, but I was the trainer for the girls' basketball team, which meant I had the key. And you know, we didn't have a recreation center, so to speak, so like kids could go. And the only place we had to play, we played 2 things all year round. We played touch football and we played basketball. But it was never got too cold to play outside football. But in the wintertime, you know, it gets real cold, so we had to go to the gym to play in the gym. And so I had the key. And so, you know, we'd let all the guys in and we just go in and play. But naturally we had to have a fire while we were playing, you know. And one day, you know, Ashley accidentally got on the floor. And the gym burned down. But that got us a new one.
State of the art gym.
State of the art. That got us a new one.
So you all helped the school board along.
Yeah, that got us a new one. That got us a new one.
And it was state of the art.
And that facility
It's still standing.
is still standing, state of the art. The school board willed it to,
Gave it for one.
gave it to the school.
The alumni association.
Alumni Association.
Did the school get closed with desegregation like so many did?
Yeah,
1970.
Yes.
70.
1970.
That's the year.
Right.
So they.
Integrated.
There was so much that went on during that time. You know, seriously, you know, that right now, the school board would get locked up for some of the things that we did. They didn't even deliver our mail to the school. We had to go pick our mail up from the post office. And that's how I got my lunch. I had a bike, as I was telling you, my father bought me a bike, and my job was to go down, to leave the campus, and go down to the post office to pick up the school mail and bring it back. And for doing that, I got a free lunch. That's what I did. That we were so far behind. The mailman didn't even deliver the mail to the school. We had to go to the post office downtown on Queen Street and pick up the school mail. And you know, when I think about it, if something could have happened to me on that bike, you know, that's why I said we had the good Lord looking out for us. Seriously.
And our campus would flood every time there was a
Heavy rain.
heavy rain.
There's a creek that ran right by it.
Right by it.
And I had
It had the same name as the school.
I had a first cousin who was drowned in that creek. And as a result of that, they tore down the whole backside, which I was building. I lived in 18th building, 12th building. They tore them down because they were flooded.
Yeah.
I remember many days of my my apartment building being flooded.
So the school flooded and the apartments
Yeah.
too.
The school didn't flood. And what happened? Adkin ran right behind the school. The school didn't get flooded. It was the apartments that were located in Mitchell Wooden Court on the back got flooded. In fact, we didn't have a swimming pool then when we were there. And that's the only time we really got to swim, so to speak, when there was a flood, because of the creek would overflow. And, you know, I almost lost my life once, you know, back in that, because I was told by some of the older guys, said, well, it's a running stream. All you got to do is jump in and the water will carry you. You know? And I dove in, and the only thing to save me, I grabbed a limb to hold on to somebody come get me. But those are the conditions that we had. We didn't, not to mention, he mentioned it saying.
Did I ask why they wanted to tell you that?
Yeah, that's very important.
Okay, we're going with
So you were saying that Adkin School,
Adkin High School is a Rosenwald school, was a Rosenwald, or is a Rosenwald
So
school.
it's gone.
And, yeah, it's gone now.
is the building gone too?
The
All
big,
of them.
yes.
It had
And even
asbestos.
in the list of schools that are Rosenwald schools, it's indicated that it's no longer one.
No, the original building
It's been
still
destroyed.
exists.
Yeah,
No, the original
But
building does not
the
exist.
gym
The gym
is still
exists.
The replacement gym.
The replacement gym is there. The original gym is gone.
Yeah.
In fact, the original school is gone.
hence the industrial courses that we had. You know, that, of course, being part of the designation, the program for the Rosenwald School.
what were the Rosenwald schools?
Well,
Go ahead, let my
Go
wife.
ahead.
Yeah,
John.
Rosenwald was the head of Sears department
Roebuck.
store, Sears and Roebuck. And because he had made so much wealth, he built schools around the South for black kids.
but he did that because Booker T. Washington approached him about doing that.
He also meant them because Sears and Roebuck himself was partly black.
Well,
Oh, well, we didn't know
that's
that.
another
Yeah.
story.
And they had that connection.
Yeah.
My understanding too is the communities had to raise part of the money.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But part of the program had to be industrial. courses. Yeah. So that's why we had the shop and the
Brick mason.
whatnot.
Brick
Yeah.
mason.
Yeah, brick mason.
You all have mentioned Mrs. Hannibal a number
Yes.
of times. I wonder if you could tell me a little bit more about her and her impact. You've mentioned that she was very much an activist.
Well, she was from the islands.
Well, no.
No, her husband.
No, her husband,
Husband.
Mrs. Hannibal
was.
lived in New Jersey. She was born in New Jersey. Her husband was West Indian.
It was
Right.
in it.
Jamaican.
Yeah. And he trained for the medical, became medical school at Fisk University. And she did not work when she was here. And I guess why I know about her because my aunt was his nurse, Miss Jarmon. You probably remember her. And so the time you were talking about the school, I could hear a lot about what was going on. And also, she was the first black person to be on the city council of Kinston. And it is true that the Klan had burned crosses on the yard. I don't know if any were burned in the time
No,
had a
it
march,
happened.
but it happened over a period of time. She was very much for education and for the improvement of the black community. And so anything she did in that support, because she was also independent, but she also felt that we did not get what we should get under the segregated system that existed in Kinston.
I imagine some of her own children are still around.
They are in Kinston, the
No,
boys.
two of
Oh,
them.
yeah?
Two of them.
Yeah.
But they should certainly
They were my
be
next door neighbors, so,
No,
you know,
two.
I was very close to them and got to know them quite well.
She had about six
Yeah.
six children. Two of the girls are past or dead now. The oldest living one is in Buffalo, who's a dentist. The oldest girl became a doctor and worked at a couple of years at Soul City
Right.
in Henderson on the court, Florida McKissick. So you can see that influence was still there upon the family. And I believe one of the younger boys now is head up the art program in Kinston.
Right, because when they celebrated the history of Kinston, my choir sang for that celebration with some of the other musicians that took part in it last year. One of the sons, her son, was MC, and it was Charles, and he introduced. But I didn't know him because he was a youngster. You know, he came along after because at one point they moved from beside where we lived on North Street. We were right next door to up on the hill.
Yes.
Was she someone that you all then were aware of growing up?
Oh
Yeah.
yes,
Without
yes,
doubt. Without
very
doubt.
active.
I was aware of it. Matter of fact, I did the floors.
I was aware of it because she had some really pretty daughters.
Yeah, I was thinking it was because of her activism.
Well, I was aware of it because this is kind of sidebar, but anyway, we had to come from crosstown. We had our senior prom, and we had to walk back to our school. No, they had the dinner crosstown. We walked back for the prom. Now, as we were walking back, I got shot. It was about 12 guys. Okay? And they start running. I start running too. And I got the impact just like a brick hit me in the back. What happened, there was a guy named Kenny Carter. No, I'll call it. Kenny Carter, I'll call it. And he was fooling with some guy who was drunk in the back. He was always doing something. And when they started running, I started running, and I got the impact. And it dropped me off by Dr. Hannibal's office. It tore my coat, a little blood on my shirt, and all that. And Miss Hannibal happened to be there at the time, and she bathed my back. But it didn't pierce. It broke the skin, but it didn't. I was lucky. I was lucky.
It was a glancing blow.
Probably a glancing blow. Yeah.
There is a municipal building named for her in Kinston today. It's been there for some time now.
So I've got a couple questions, but where are we for time?
Oh.
We-
Our time is your time.
Yes.
Well, we're
No,
about,
I know we want to eat.
No, I have another appointment. So
We
it's
do have
3:41.
We do have food. We have food.
How do you spell the last name?
Hannibal, Hannibal.
I think we're about 2.5 hours in, 2 hours and 15 minutes, something like that.
So can I ask maybe two questions and for everybody to respond to? One is, I'm wondering about your parents' influence on the decisions that you made or the actions. If you, I mean, I think some of that's already come through, but if you wanted to say anything about that. And then I was wondering if you could, I know it's not nearly enough time, but maybe take about a few minutes to tell us something of what you've done since high school. I mean, a few of you have already, but just at least a little bit. And sort of, I know you mentioned that until a few years ago you hadn't really thought about the walkout, and maybe sort of what you think about it now in retrospect. Anybody want to start?
Well, now you can start. It's very difficult, really, not to have that experience come to bear because, and I say that for this reason, every other year we have a class reunion. We have a high school class reunion in Kinston, and it's at that time there is a reflection on what happened back then during that time, you know. So it's pretty difficult to get it completely out of your system, you know. And we're constantly trying to make some of the people who came after us aware of some of the things that we were confronted with during that time in our lives, you know. So it was reference. You got to realize something too. Most of our parents, for the most part, didn't even attend high school, didn't finish high school. So some of the kinds of things that took place then, you know, they didn't have no conception of, you know what I'm saying, as to have any type of impact, good, bad, or indifferent. You know what I mean? So they didn't have a really a bearing on the outcome of the repercussions or whatever, you know, because they were so far removed. You know, they was brought in an area where, you know, if I might, you know, just use the phrase, you know, like if Mr. Charlie is the term we're using now for the other persuasion, if Mr. Charlie said, you do this, you did it, and you didn't question it. And so they didn't have any really.
Let me add to you, I recall as a student, I was a college student at North Carolina College in Durham in 1961, 2, 3. And Floyd McKissick was there, who was head of court at that time. And we were marching on the theaters in the cafeterias to break down the segregation. And as students, we were walking down the street, down Federal Street, going down, and there were adults on the side. Why don't you kids go back to the school? You don't have any business walking down there. This is what he said. They were not in perspective. They had a different view about what we were doing as students. And so I would assume that even back in '52, you can imagine what it was like. So I heard nothing about it. Nothing from the families. Mr. Hannibal did.
These were black adults standing.
Yeah, black.
No. On the corners, you know, at times. You have to pass by those corners.
I don't know. Well, it maybe it had some influence because I didn't know I was a leader, but I led in high school, vice president's class, and vice president always in my class practically every year. Frederick Thompson, who was a part of the committee, always came out number one because he was a very smart guy. But when I got into college, that followed me. My sophomore year, president class, junior year, president class, senior year, president class, and also president of my college student body. Now, that was very important as I think back on it, But I never looked at myself as a leader, but maybe it's other people looked at it that way. Because I don't think I had the influence from my parents. It was innate. And part of it was the kind of teachers that we had at Adkin High School.
Very important.
They were serious and dedicated teachers. It wasn't the education that we were getting. No, that wasn't the problem. It was the facility and how those things could advance our education.
I wanted to say that at one point, my husband was president of the Adkin High School Alumni Association for 13 years. And at one point, I said to him, there are many students that don't know about this walkout. They don't know how we got this gymnasium. All they know is it's there, their part. So I said to him, I said, Reggie, should we call Frederick Thompson, because I knew he was one of the leaders, and ask him to tell that story, or what have you, so that we can put it up in our gymnasium or share it with the students, that come along. And so he said, well, yeah. He said, call him. So I called Frederick, and he told me a lot of things, even though I walked out, a lot of things that we didn't know. And he wrote me a letter, and honest to goodness, I don't know where that letter is today, because it would be priceless if I could find it.
Yeah.
But when he wrote that, what Reggie and I did, we sat up night after night, putting that story. And he called John, because your name is attached to the story. And I keep it in my house. It's downstairs, you'll see, where he put it on the computer and wrote that story out. And he put it up in the gymnasium. But when we have our reunion, the people come back, they're so excited about seeing each other. A lot of times they don't take the time to really read it. So I have suggested with our DC Chapter Alumni Association that when we have our banquet, because we have a banquet every year, is that we need to make a PowerPoint presentation, because the sound system in our gymnasium is not that great. And you sit with your classes and everybody's talking, and in the back, they can't hear a lot. So I said, if we did this PowerPoint presentation, it would get everybody's attention, and we would tell that story. And my niece said to me at one of our meetings, she said, you, my aunt, you sitting here, you never told me how we got this gymnasium. I said, your mother was head of the cafeteria at Adkin, and she didn't tell you. But they didn't talk about it for many reasons, and one was probably the backlash that they could have gotten, what have you. But he and I sat up in that up in the office, and he put it on the computer, and it is hanging in our gym. But I think we could do more in getting it out to our alumni. So I hope we can do that presentation that way. Y'all think that's a good idea?
Yeah, I think we all appreciate the walkout and what the class of 52, how they organize it. We appreciate it more every year.
Yeah.
And as we grow older, we understand the importance of it and the impact that it has had on our lives. But now my parents, my father did go to college. He went to college 1 year, went to St. Augustine College in Raleigh. And then the family that was supporting him, the money ran out, so he never finished. My mother never went to college, but he did impress upon us to go to school. And but as far as that walkout, it really is important. I see the significance of it much more. But we need to tell our story.
Yes.
We need to continue to tell it. We really do. We don't do that well enough.
What about the, can you talk about that? To what degree the status we've applied for?
Start,
What,
well,
The president.
each on preservation?
Yeah.
National Register of Historic.
Right. We have applied to the National, Register
sorry,
for
preservation.
Historic Preservation for national recognition of the gym. And at this point, I have to say that that application was withdrawn, it was advised by us, by the regional director from Greenville, that because there are some imperfections on the gym, that is, things that were modified since it was originally built. Now, what the most important is that we don't have the windows at the back of the gym have been covered over. I'm not sure. I think there's maybe still maybe the original ones, but they still need to be restored, restoration. Secondly, and maybe the first is that the original school is not there. That is not there. So, and then there's an extension where there are apartments, and it butts the gym. And you want to know to what extent the integrity of that gym has been changed and modified. Well, it has been modified. There are 23 apartments there. And so we're not sure exactly how that will work out. So he said, in light of other applications from the state of North Carolina, where you have the buildings almost complete as they are, this would not be a good time to submit it. And so we had to withdraw that application.
I wonder if the fact that it's a Rosenwald school would have any impact on that, because there is a move afoot now to preserve those schools.
Well, see, that's the point.
We don't have.
You don't have the school, I know, but I know the school isn't there,
But see, I think it's part of the cultural history. We indicated that it was not because of the architectural nature of the building that we were trying to get recognition, but the significance of it. In other words, the gym is still associated with the school.
Yeah.
It was Adkin High School. And so it was torn down. I think you mentioned that because of asbestos problems, but also because it was just decrepit. It had not been kept up. And so
Go ahead.
if we had more foresight and money at that time, we could still perhaps preserve the school. But we didn't have that insight, we didn't have the knowledge that we have now. And so the school was torn down.
If I can make one other point of significance, as I see it, the story that I gave the editor in 2010, he won the National Award, Editor of the Year, for having printed that story. So that means the state did recognize the significance of what happened.
It had been done.
And I'm
You
going
give
to
it to
close the,
Okay.
yeah, we're going again, okay.
I was saying my husband, as he was president, he had an artist to come in and draw the school, and honest to goodness, when you walk into that faculty room with all of our teachers,
It's real.
it looks just like you're walking into that school. So that was his way of keeping that school preserved and alive to us.
It
So
looks real too.
It really does.
Kim,
Yes, sir.
I wanted to respond to your question. I didn't get a chance.
Okay, well, I actually had another question for you too, so I'll throw that at you at the same time. Well, if I understand correctly, you brought the walkout to the attention of the Smithsonian.
That's
And
correct.
So I wondered if, as part of answering the question, maybe you could speak to why you thought it was important for us to do this interview and have this story.
Well, I knew the nation was missing out on a really good story, on the one hand. On the other hand, this provided for me, because I'm younger than everybody, a step out into the civil rights movement for myself. I took my first overt actions against Jim Crow, as I indicated, on the bus, and then to a lunch counter in Kinston. But it went beyond that. I joined CORE as a result of going to New York and taking a bus ride back and being asked to get off in Baltimore and then take a local bus from Baltimore to Washington to chart where black people stood, where they could go to bathrooms or purchase goods or so forth. And just to do that between those two cities in December of 1960. Little did I know that 4 months later, the Freedom Rides would be occurring, and that what I was doing was intelligence for the Freedom Rides, because James Farmer had asked me to to do this. So I was in Corps for about a year before joining SNCC. And as a student in college at that time, I used because I was on 2 teams at the university, I was able to use those trips to other campuses to organize. And that's what I did.
How did you approach that?
How did I? As I traveled from campus to campus, I would first I would talk with some of the ball players as to what kinds of activities they were doing to further, integration. And sometimes they would say, well, we're not doing very much because this is a private university, or because people are scared, or there were always reasons why they weren't doing things. So I would encourage them that here's a way to take that step, and then I would take the time, if I had the time at that moment, to show them organizing principles and leave a phone number so that they could get in touch with either me or somebody else so that we could further it. Sometimes you go to a campus and there would be people who are already organizing, so you begin to form an alliance with that university. And it was university students who were doing a lot of this work, as you know. Well, it got so heated at the school that I went to, Fayetteville State University. At one point, we had any number of people in the street in Fayetteville and doing picketing, boycotting, sitting in. And on a very hot day, we just decided to take a break, and I went in for a soda along with a colleague, and it kind of took his time to getting it. So I just kind of leaned against the stool. We didn't intend to sit. But I did sit after he bought it, because now I'm tired and I'm drinking. And then he tells me that I can't do that because I'm not allowed. That's when I really got comfortable on the stool. So he calls the police. Police comes, and the sergeant, he has his name and badge number right across here. And he begins to question me about my draft card. Well, I knew that I did not have to produce my draft card. He wanted my identification. So he began to harass me, basically. At which point, soldiers from Fort Bragg, from Connecticut and New York, who were sitting nearby, white soldiers, began to get angry at him and just told him in salty language to get out. Well, I had to kind of counsel them to, hey, take it easy, this is our fight, we'll get through it. Well, he goes out and brings the police chief of Fayetteville, North Carolina, back in. Long story short, they take me into custody to Pope Air Force Base, the FBI office. Since I wouldn't identify myself, they were going to make me identify myself. So they took me to the FBI office, at which point they asked the FBI agent to have me produce the draft card. Back in those days, you had to carry it. If you didn't, you were going straight to the Selective Service Board. And, well, I had it, so the FBI agent, we were in a separate room, he asked me for it, and I said, yes, I do have it, but I'm a student, and I'm here on false pretense, and I don't really need to show it to you. He says, well, I really do have to cooperate with these guys. I said, okay, if that means whatever happens to me, the blood is going to be on your hands. He says, well, I have to cooperate with these guys. So I showed it. They take me back to where they picked me up, And as the sergeant gets out of the car, the police chief says to me, "Look, if I ever get you in my jail, you might not come out alive." 2 weeks later, we get a cease and desist order, an injunction, with all the leaders' names on it, and of course mine is there. And I knew at that point that there was no way on God's earth that I was going to answer that, because if I went down and jaywalked, I was in his jail. Or if I spit on the sidewalk, I was in his jail. I went to New York and I never went back to Fayetteville State again. All right? But it didn't stop me. I continued with a foot in school. I continued working, and I continued organizing. I organized in every southern state except Mississippi, and several western states and some northern states. And I observed a number of my friends and colleagues leave us prematurely. Too many of them prematurely. So I decided that if I lived to be 55 years old, that I would retire, and that's what I did. But in the interim, throughout the rest of time in terms of the civil rights movement itself, which some will characterize as being to 1970, I was in SNCC until SNCC ended. I had no part in the March on Washington. I was upstate New York at that time.
What were you say you were in SNCC until it ended. What was your primary role in the organization?
Actually, it's a funny role because I was in school and I was working. I did things by assignment. I also wrote position papers. And I don't know if you know what those are, but let me tell you, if you wanted to know what SNCC's position was on any matter, they may not have had one. Somebody had to develop it. And I was the guy who would write a position paper on it, justify it. I responded to James Foreman. So I would go in on a Friday, or maybe I'd go in the middle of the week from school and say to James, "Look, I can be available from Friday to Monday." And he would say, "Okay, I want you in Greenville, Alabama. Here's a person I want you to contact." So off I go for those 2 or 3 days. Sometimes I'm paying my own way. Sometimes Belafonte or some of those guys would have some money so that I could travel. But that's what I did to stay in the movement. And the position papers, I developed any number of those over time. So it's these beginnings, though, in Kinston that helped to propel that kind of interest and involvement that was for me.
Yes, sir.
Even today, I've had a great emphasis for youth, empathy for youth. I dated back to my beginnings because for 8 years I chaired the DC Coalition for Youth. Dr. Edelman was one of the members. 40 dues paying youth organizations we had, and I chaired that for 8 years. And we were primarily responsible for putting Marion Barry's youth summer program together in terms of a work program. And we closed down the old receiving home and a lot of other things that we did for youth. But there were 40 agencies or more that was in that coalition. So I can say that probably some of the things I did. Now, Eleanor, I'm surprised at you. This kid, I get angry with her because she doesn't like to talk about something that's so significant. Would you please talk about it?
Well, we really may not have a lot of time, but what he's talking about is while I was a teacher, and I've always had an affection for helping youth, like he said. I'm in the arts. So before I retired from DC Public Schools in 1993, I formed this boys choir. We are now in our 20th year. We're celebrating our 20th anniversary. We made 3 international tours. The first one was to Austria for Austria's millennium. We were in Switzerland, the cities in Austria. Then we went on to Paris, France. Second tour was to England for the International Children's Choir Festival. Boys took on each tour probably 25 to 27, 30 boys. The third one was to China for the Pre-Olympic Music Festival. And we have been invited this year to Italy. So I'm hoping that I can hold up so we can do that one. but it's a long story about that choir. And John brought it up. He wanted me to let you know about it. But that, I guess, from my youth, you know, trying to help our students open their eyes to a larger world and what they are actually a part of and seeing other environments. This has been my passion to help boys to do that, and it has worked for so many of them. You know, they keep in touch. Right now I have one on Broadway. He's playing for Motown, which is the big musical now. Boston, they're all over, you know, opera. Not all of them go in music, but they're the ones that keep in touch, they're successful. We sing each year with the Morehouse Men's Glee Club, which John has heard. We have a partnership with them where the boys have dinner with them. They talk about college life, that kind of thing. So that's my challenge in my retirement is to keep up with these boys and to keep them, you know, thinking on a larger plane and letting them know that they can become whatever they want to, but they have to have the exposure so they can know what they can become. So that's just a short part of life.
Thank you, dear.
Well, thank you all very much. I think that we could obviously talk about quite a bit more, but it's been a wonderful interview, and we also have your biographical information to fill in. And I think I forgot at the beginning, I should say that John Bishop is here filming, and Elaine Nichols is here with the Smithsonian, also part of the interview. And thank you again very much for the interview and for your wonderful stories. And I'm sorry we don't have several days.
I was going to say, if you want to come back, I would be happy to host. But it's been my pleasure to have you, and it's been my pleasure to sit here with my colleagues to hear part of the story that I didn't know about. I guess each one of us shared something that the others didn't know about. So it's just been a wonderful way of bringing us together and, you know, hopefully supporting our alma mater.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, go.
Thank you.
Now, I know we have time. What food? You gotta eat this food.
This video raises questions, and I need for you to be extremely honest in the comments when answering them. And just so you know, I have 3 questions. Number 1, at what age do you have an entrepreneurial mindset? Number 2, did your parents at any time ever stop you from playing sports? And number 3, did you ever have to defend the honor of a family member? Now, please be honest when answering these questions. Share this video with anyone you deem necessary, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.